Your question presupposes the government is a monolith, and at least in the United States, government is not a monolith. We have, close to 50 independent states, and they all do very different things. The experience in New England with the money flowing into energy efficiency has been generally quite good. But the most successful programs are those where competing providers of carbon reductions compete to get at that pot of money. The state of Vermont, Efficiency Vermont, in Oregon, the Energy Trust of Oregon are producing energy savings at a cost of 2 to 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, less than half of the cost of any new supply, which means that the carbon reductions that come with them have an effective cost of less than nothing. And if we use those better models for allowing competing providers of carbon reductions to compete for a pot of money, I think we can accomplish a great deal. But if the question is it possible the government will just piss all the money away?
There's a young man who's had his hand up for some time.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. This might be for Eric. The California judges issued a stay on California's cap and trade program because some environmental justice groups are saying that it's bad. Is it going to be worse off? Are they going to be worse off under cap and trade than they already are? And do you think this is actually going to stop the program?
Do I think the affected communities that have brought the suit will be worse off under cap and trade than they are right now? There are some very specific and very localized claims that they're making with respect to air pollution from certain kinds of plants. But without knowing the details, I can't say for sure, but I would be surprised if, in aggregate over time, low-income communities of color, who are the primary drivers behind that suit, would be worse off by constraining. You can imagine some technical stuff at the margins where certain kinds of polluters in certain places end up staying in business longer than they might have otherwise. But it's important to remember, but enacting cap and trade in California does not in any way change the regulatory structures about conventional air pollutants on those plants in California. So I'm saying no, but it's complicated.
Yeah, well, I have a copy of the court decision. It was issued yesterday with me. If anyone wants to look at it during the break, about 75–80% of the expected carbon reductions under the California target set by AB 32 are expected to be achieved through what are called complementary measures: energy efficiency, land use changes, a whole suite of measures. And only about 25% are left to cap and trade. The communities that were affected are low-income communities that exist in the immediate vicinity of some oil refineries primarily. And their concern is that those oil refineries will just buy the allowances that they need and continue emitting the pollution that they're now emitting, whereas a direct control method that required everybody to reduce their emissions by 20% would share the environmental benefits uniformly across the state. I think there is a legitimate concern. I think the court has responded to those concerns. I actually think the court was right on the law and that the ARB should have done more environmental process on the alternatives to cap and trade than they did. They will now do that. I expect the Air Resources Board will ask for, will appeal, or maybe already has appealed, and will ask for a stay on that. I'm not going to predict the outcome of the legal wrangling, but I expect at least the 75% of the savings that are to be achieved through complementary measures, not through market mechanisms, will all survive this. That is, the energy codes and the fuel economy standards, the energy efficiency and renewable portfolio standards, the low carbon fuel standard. I think all of those will survive that, and California is on track to get at least 3/4 of what it's setting out to get.
Yeah, it's important to know also that one of the options the judges had was to stay the entire suite, all of AB 32, so that was sort of the worst case scenario. It's only on the cap and trade that they have to go back.
Go ahead.
To what degree is the BC tax being viewed as a model across Canada versus the other provinces saying that you're a special case because hydro solves your electricity problem? Related is you said that there was very little opposition. The natural opposition comes from fossil generators, from heavy manufacturers, and the utility industry, who's generally speaking out of both sides of their mouth. But are you a special case in BC because you've solved the problem of electricity, and therefore the utilities are on your side, and even the manufacturers are on your side, and the only real natural opposition is the fuel industry?
Right. Well, BC is not unique as a province in Canada that has an abundance of hydro resources. The province of Quebec, our second most populated province, actually has a higher percentage there, like 96-97% hydro. I could have that number wrong. It's very, very high. It's higher than British Columbia. Same with Manitoba. And I think it's very fair to say that the fact that the carbon tax would not impact electricity rates was a major reason why it was accepted. So that's a totally fair comment. In terms of it being viewed across Canada as a model, again, speaking as Jeremy and not as an employee of the province, one of the two major political parties in Canada in the federal election shortly after we introduced carbon tax used a carbon tax very similar to our model as the central plank of their election platform, and they were defeated soundly across Canada. So people, again, this is sort of another sort of tongue-in-cheek thing. When I tell people in the States we have a carbon tax, they often say, oh yeah, well, you're Canadian, you like taxes. Not true, we don't like taxes either. And I think those results better really show that it's still an uphill battle across the country.
Yes, thank you. How might a carbon tax apply to the oil, tar sands?
Can you repeat the
That's
question?
a brilliant follow-up question.
Can you repeat the question?
Sorry.
I heard I don't like taxes in a big way, to start with.
The question was how would a carbon tax apply to Alberta and the tar sands or the oil sands? Specifically, I can't really comment. It's sort of a touchy issue. It's tough for me as an employee of BC to start talking about Alberta's situation. They do have a technology fund. They do have a carbon price for all emissions that are above their reduction target. So there is a modest price of $15 a ton there. But I think it's pretty fair to say that a major reason why we're not taking climate policy nationally, taking climate action nationally, is because of the disparity in situations in different provinces.
Currently, the current technology for extraction of oil from tar sands involves apply a lot of heat, and that heat is coming from the use of fossil fuels. There has, however, been ideas spawned a couple of times to build a couple of nuclear power plants up in the tar sands area to produce steam to release the oil from the tar sands, which would probably eliminate the carbon tax impact on the production cost side of separating the oil from the tar sands. There would still be an awful lot of carbon involved in the heavy equipment that has to move mountain-sized quantities of material, and then the ultimate oil that's produced would be subject to a carbon tax. But the biggest thing that's unique is the separation heat requirement, and there are non-carbon alternatives to those.
Tony?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification for myself and maybe for the group. While I don't disagree with the audience member's point about corn ethanol, I can remember pumping ethanol spiked fuel back in the late 70s, which had nothing to do with carbon reduction. It had to do with oil import reduction. Isn't that really what happened, and perhaps industry hijacked that program for their benefit? Could you help clarify that?
Farmers are making an awful lot of money right now at 2 and 3 times the price per bushel that they were getting a while ago, and people who live on tortillas are
Agreed. But that's not where the program was initiated. It was initiated to reduce oil consumption back in the 70s. And it got hijacked, I think, by the corn industry, perhaps. No?
The political reason given was clearly to reduce oil consumption. But what was it driven by? It could, politics is a lot more complicated.
So I'm going to intervene here in this lively discussion and tell you that it's time for the break, and